Hello and good evening. So glad you could join me this evening. Though I can't see you, I feel your energy. I appreciate you guys for coming in so we can talk about setting boundaries with your coworkers and with your family. I don't know how serious this is for y'all, but actually, to be honest with you, I don't really have that issue, but I know several of us do. So I know this is definitely a necessary conversation. But we're going to go ahead and get started. Hey, hey, hey. Boss lady is in the building. I appreciate you. Definitely glad you can hop on. But listen. Okay, I'm going to start off before I start off with the whole talk. I'm going to start off by saying work relationships can be intense, okay? Even today, just a quick story, even today, realizing that sometimes we overshare at work. Like, y'all ever get in this situation? Maybe you're not the oversharer, but maybe your coworkers just feel the need to tell you like everything that's going on. Like, oh, so and so said this about me. They were talking about you. All the stuff that you could just keep to yourself. Anyway, we'll get to all that in a minute. But I just had to get it off my chest. Sometimes you just leave work and you're like, ugh, get it off me. All of that y'all bring into your work environment, get that off of me. But so last time we talked about setting boundaries with within your relationship with your partner as well as with your friends. For those of you who were not able to join us, we talked about several things. We talked about what boundaries are not. That it's not a punishment. It's not a way to manipulate somebody. It's definitely not a way to have control over what somebody does or doesn't do. And so when we talked about friends, I was really specific about the fact that even your friends don't need to know everything that's going on in your relationships. And there should always be boundaries, and even in those relationships. And there are some people, even in my life, that I feel like I can tell any and everything to. But that doesn't mean I should, right? So we talked about that last time. So today, our focus is really on family as well as coworkers. So anytime we talk about family, I know that can definitely be a sensitive topic. Everybody has different backgrounds, different relationships with their family members. And sometimes we allow things to go on for so long that it's just like, that's how it is. It's like, I don't know how to change that. I don't know how to adjust that boundary. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't like it anymore. It doesn't suit me, the nature of our relationship, but I don't know how to fix that. Right? So let me ask you, have you ever had a family member that just didn't understand the meaning of boundaries? Like, have you? Like, have you had a family member that you had to say, okay, enough is enough. I need space. I need you to know that I'm not your personal bank. Whatever the boundary is. And we'll go over specifics in a minute. Have you ever done that? Or is that you? Are you the person that other people need boundaries from? Like maybe you don't like boundaries. And if that's you, listen, I'm not knocking you. Like sometimes you don't know that there are boundaries that you're crossing if people don't tell you. Same thing. That's why we're having this discussion. People don't know what the boundaries are if they're never established. If we never say, this is where I draw the line. This is where it's too much. Right? So what about coworkers and bosses? Like, have you ever been or have you ever had a boss that thought that you should be available whenever they called? Have you? Like, hey, it's my day off. Days off mean off the clock. Days off mean I'm not working. Right? Right? Like, have you ever had that type of boss that just felt like whatever they asked, you had to do? And how did you handle that situation? So for some of us, and I'll ask the question, feel free to put it in the chat, and let me back up for a second. When we're talking today, I say this every time. I don't want to talk to myself. I love talking to y'all. I like when y'all talk back. So if it's you, if you're the person who may need to realize that other people need space and need boundaries, and that maybe sometimes you tiptoe across that line a couple times, that's okay. It's always room for improvement. Every single one of us has room for improvement. If that's not you, but you may struggle with setting those boundaries, that's okay too. We're a work in progress. The goal is what? Progress, not perfection. We're not going to get it right every time. Look, most of the time, I don't get it right. I'm not going to say I am. I was, right? That's why I can have this conversation, because I was a yes girl, right? Yeah, whatever you need, I got you. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. You need me to come over there? Okay, when I get off, you need me to stop by? I got you, right? That's not always healthy. That is so true, Mark. She said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Oh, she said, let your no be hell no. I love that. And that's a major part about when we're letting people know what we can and cannot do and where we're at personally. That not only should you tell them what you expect and what you can and can't do, but show them too. So I'm not going to be like, oh, no, I don't, that's too much. And then I still show up every time they call. I still answer the phone. I still respond to the message. I still keep my door unlocked. You show up whenever? Okay. Anyway, so let me get my little stuff back on track over here. All right, so of course, when we talk about family, that includes, not just your partner, not just your siblings, but your parents, your grandparents, your cousins, nieces and nephews. Malk, that is 100%. And you in my notes. So I was just about to say that in a little bit, that everyone's emergency is not my emergency. And that especially happens with family. So maybe you have a parent. Maybe your parents think that whenever they call, you have to drop whatever you're doing and show up. Oh my God, the light bulb's broken. I need you to help me fix it. Yeah, I can come tomorrow. I need it done now. Do you, or can you do it? Or can you wait? There are times that if you can't do it, you have to be able to say, I can't do it. Because if you show up every time they call you, they expect that from you. That means they don't believe there's a limit. They don't believe there's a number of times they should call you before you say no, because your answer is always yes. So all of them, nieces, nephews, uncles, cousins, brother, sister, grandparents, James said, nah, I'm cat for moms, I'm there. And that's true. And here's the thing too. In your relationships, you get to decide what's too much. You get to decide if every single time your mom calls, you're going to show up. Like, even if it's an inconvenience to you, even if it's something that could wait, but it's an emergency to her, do you allow it to be an emergency for you? That's a question we have to ask ourselves when we're deciding on what kind of boundaries we ought to be setting. And so, to be clear, just so there's no confusion, I'm talking about fully functioning, autonomous, independent adults. Obviously, I'm not talking about people who are dependent on other people for their livelihood or for their health. I'm not talking about those individuals. I'm talking about people who are fully capable of doing things for themselves or of setting boundaries for themselves, right? So we have things that require our attention, our jobs. If you're in a relationship, that requires your attention. Some of us volunteer, that requires your attention, right? Some of us go on vacation sometimes. That's like when you talk about self-care and you having me time, That is definitely a boundary that no one should be able to cross. When I'm in my me mode, which doesn't happen it's not all day, every day, but I should have time to myself, right? That's a boundary. And you just have to, hey, you know what? I'm not available the rest of today. I'm so sorry. But tomorrow, though, I'm good. Or if that's something that you desire to do, if you're able to show up the following day. But either way, how you communicate what you're able to do and what you're not able to do is important. It's important because for however many years you've been who you are and you've been showing up and you've been doing and you've been going and they've been expecting, that doesn't change overnight. Just because you change your mind like this doesn't mean that the other person is able to shift as quickly as you, right? Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe, when it comes to family, you have exhausted your patience. They have exhausted your patience. When we talk about family, we can talk about privacy. We can talk about space. We can talk about financial boundaries. All of those things, because they can easily be crossed. Case in point. So most of us, not all of us, most of us were raised, probably by our parents or our grandparents. So, and I've said it to my son before too. You know what? You owe me. And that can be a way of manipulating somebody into thinking. I'm not saying that I do it to my son is 8, guys. I'm not saying that I do, that we would do that to manipulate our children or our parents. But sometimes it is a form of manipulation when someone brings up the fact, I've done all this for you. The least you could do is buy me a car. The least you can do is help me pay my rent. The least you can do is bring food over every Friday. There are things that, because of our relationship with certain individuals, they may think they have certain freedoms or they may feel entitled to a certain extent to have parts of us and to have things from us that maybe we're no longer okay giving as much as they would like. Absolutely, I'm going to buy you things when I can. Question is, if you're asking every week, am I obligated to give that to you? Am I obligated to obliging your every need, your every desire? Because most of the time it's not even a need. So when we talk about privacy, it's never been an issue for me, but I remember my lovely mother and just how she would pop up at my brother's house, right? I'd be like, and some people are like, man, that's awesome. She'll pop up and clean and bring groceries. And for some people with their family dynamic, that's just natural. I mean, I'm going to just pop up and see you because either you don't answer the phone or just because that's what I do. I pop up. You got that pop-up spirit, right? But for some of us, we like notification. Hey, you don't know what I'm doing. I might be in the tub and want a night to myself. I might have company over. I might be on my way out. You don't know because you haven't called, right? So privacy is a major thing. Your family's going through your mail. Your mail? Is your name on the mail or is their name on the mail? That is definitely, there are some ways that even family can invade your privacy, and you have to be able to let them know that's not okay. And here's the thing. There are certain ways that setting boundaries is super easy. No. No is a full sentence. No, I can't. I don't want to. I'm not able to. And as easy as that sounds, like I said, I'm a recovering yes woman, right? As easy as the word no sounds, the emotion that can be attached to setting those boundaries can be a struggle for some people, right? So having to tell somebody, I actually made other plans this time. I'm not going to be able to come over. And that's like somebody that has your heart. Like say my grandmother, right? Say my cousins and I decided to do something. We planned it already. And then I told my grandmother I was coming into town and she would prefer me to go over to see her. But we planned what we planned for like weeks. I'm not too good at telling my grandmother, no, not doing it. I don't think that's unreasonable to show up. However, if I have plans already, then now I have to compromise, or now it's up to me to compromise. Okay, I don't have to spend the whole 6 hours with my cousins. I can come over there for at least 2, right? That's also a way of setting boundaries to let people know that though they may not have total access to you and total access to whatever they're asking for, but there are some times when you can meet them halfway. Do I want you showing up at 1 o'clock in the morning with no notice? Probably not. But if you need a place to crash because you've been out or whatever, just call me. My door is more than likely open. I just want to know that you're coming. I just don't want to have to hop out the bed because it sounds like somebody is running from a fire, right? Or somebody's running from somebody that's coming to get them and you just decided to show up. I hope that makes sense, right? So also when we think about family and we talk about, as a matter of fact, an example that comes to mind, and some of you may or may not have seen this movie. I think it's called Bad Moms Christmas or something like that. And sometimes we have issues setting boundaries because we expect the other person to meet us and treat us the same way that we treat them, right? So in this movie, one of the moms, her mom only called when she needed money. And some of us have family members like that. I don't hear from you. I don't know where you are in life. And then as soon as you need help, money, clothes, a place to stay, that's when we hear from you. And that's just the nature of the person. What happens when you say no? What happens when you say I can't? Right? Do they cut you off? Are they open to having the discussion of I need more from you than you just calling me when you need something? There was another mom in that movie, as a matter of fact, that had a severe issue with personal space boundaries. Like she would show up, like she showed up at her daughter's house, who was married with kids, by the way, and just would not give her personal space. Like the daughter was, of course, in bed with her husband, her mom sitting in the corner, in the room, in the dark. I just wanted to be close to you. Now that's an extreme version of what could happen when somebody doesn't understand personal space boundaries. But there are people like your family members, some of them may want to work where you work. They want to hang out with the same friends. They want to go out whenever you go out. And to an extent, you may be okay with it until you're not. And what happens when you're not? At that point is when you have to set the boundary. And I think I may have said this last time. The beautiful thing about it is that you can change your mind at any time. You can decide this is too much. You can decide this is not something I'm okay with anymore. What fit me when I was a teenager is not the same thing that fits me as a 30-plus-year-old adult. It's just not. She said, what's the mom look like though? That's not important, James. So that's the things that when we talk about family and setting those boundaries years after we've already been living a certain way or giving off a certain impression, it just takes a conversation to be honest. Sometimes several conversations. So, and then we talk about also time. So I remember there was a time when my mom was here where she wanted to have dinner like on a regular basis on Sundays. And that's not an infringement on my time or my space. Like, family dinners are cool. But what about for people who are expected to be at their parents' house every evening, right? Like their parents expect that. Your family expects you to cut their grass every weekend. But you have your own house, your own family. Like, how do you deal with those? Are those are those situations that you're okay with not having boundaries for? My family did for me all those years, now I do for them. Because that's the mindset that some of us have, right? We feel like because of all the years that they poured into me and the money they poured into me and the time, I have no choice but to reciprocate. But what they did for you is what they felt was best. And if what they're asking of you is not what's in your best interest, and it's disturbing your mental health, it's disturbing your peace, it's causing you to be exhausted, then that's not what's best for you. And you can't let somebody guilt trip you into thinking that because they did it, I have to. Because they gave this much, now I have to. Like, I hope that man, please, if anybody has, because that situation can change depending on who the person is and what they're asking of you. But definitely, if you have input or a different perspective, I would love to hear that. Because relationships with your family, with your friends, with your partner, they all vary. There are so many variables to relationships and what history you have with somebody and whether or not you've given them permission for things that you didn't like, or even whether or not you gave them permission unknowingly just because you never said no. For some people, if you don't say no, that means go. That means yes. And that's not always the case, but that's how some people interpret it. Well, she didn't say I couldn't come over and eat the food in her kitchen. She didn't say I couldn't show up and cook breakfast. Why would you? You have your own home. Why are you cooking breakfast in my house? Boundaries, right? All right, so that's pretty much it when we talk about family. There are other areas where there could be and should be boundaries when it comes to family, but those are the main three: the physical, the time, and the financial boundaries. And if we're not already setting boundaries and having those conversations, and always in a respectful way, I think earlier Mal said hell no, right? Let your yes be yes and let your no be hell no. It doesn't always have to be that. Sometimes it can just be no and that's it. Yeah, you might be mad. You might not be comfortable with me not telling you yes. But I'm okay. And this is what I need. And that's also an important part about when you set boundaries is knowing what your needs are. Not just what your capabilities are, but your needs. So James said it's hard to be self-aware when you're a giver. Nope. When you're a giver with a yes spirit, how do we recognize this in ourselves with our family and change things? That is a great question, James. So When you're a giver with a yes spirit, you realize that when you're to the point of discomfort or frustration, or like I said, when it affects your mental health, like when you feel like you're giving too much and you feel exhausted from all of the yes, all of the yeses that you're giving, all of the ways that you're pouring out that you're not getting back, that you're not being poured back into, all of the things that you're doing for, and that's not to say to do with the expectation of people doing for you, but sometimes you give so much until you feel like you have nothing left to give, and that's a really dangerous place to be, when you feel like you can't give anymore, but that's your heart to give. I love being able to tell people, yes, yes, I got you. Yes, I'm here. Yes, I'll show up. But when I'm so exhausted, I can't even do that. That's when it's dangerous. And that's when you have to start taking that time to yourself and really assessing where you are in your relationships. Because in that case, it may not be that you have to say no forever. It just may be, for this season, I need the answer to be no. So you'll probably hear more no's from me than yeses right now, because I'm recharging. Do I expect you to pour more into me? If that's not you, then no. But I need to do what's best for me in this season. Tara said mental boundaries too, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Mental boundaries are a major part of why we set boundaries, for our own mental health, and to be able to be secure in ourselves and insecure in the relationships that we have, the way that we think, the way that we feel. We have to be able to feel free enough to maintain our sanity, our sanity in our relationships, without compromising what's important to us. James said, how do you know what your needs are? I feel like I really don't need ish. You know what your needs are. You know that if you feel, and it really has to do with what you feel, and also what might be lacking in your life. Yeah, if you're I'm gonna do it myself person, you're gonna do that up to a point, but at some point you'll think, well, how come they never do this for me? How come I don't have anybody in my life that will do that? Maybe it's time. Maybe for you, you're a giver of your time. But you start to wonder, why am I always showing up for people and people don't show up for me? Why am I always supporting this event and that and this person? And when I need people to show up for me, I get the I'm busy. I'm so sorry. I wish I could. And that's important too, because you have to be in the relationships. If you don't feel like you can trust anybody to pour, to show up, to help, that may be an area in your life that you just have to be able to release a little bit at a time. What's up, girl? Tamara. But yeah, that may be an area that you have to start learning to release a little bit. Sometimes we get so used to living a certain way, living in a way that I'll just take care of everything myself, like you said, James. But that's not always. We're interdependent, right? So we're going to need other people. Tara said, I don't feel free when there's mental abuse being done by my parents as a young 23-year-old adult. And that's an important thing to note, because not everybody recognizes what mental abuse looks like. Not everybody recognizes when certain types of communication and certain things that are said to us are not healthy, and they do more tearing us down than lifting us up. And sometimes for a season. I don't ever want to recommend to somebody to separate from their parents for a season, but if for you it's keeping you feeling bound, it's keeping you feeling heavy, it's making you feel depressed, if you're able, if you have the capability to separate yourself from that individual, from that situation, you have to be responsible to build yourself up. You can't expect other people to do that for you. Unfortunately, we want our parents to be that for us, but they only do what they know. They only repeat what they've experienced. You said you didn't recognize it till this year growing up. Right. And we all come to a certain point. That's why I said the way that we understand things and our boundaries can change based on how our situations change and our level of growth. And those boundaries can be set at any time, no matter what our history and our patterns have been. And so, of course, we could discuss, ways that we have not been able to express ourselves and set those boundaries with people who love us or people who we love. We could definitely talk about that all day, but at some point you have to be the one to initiate. And isn't it crazy how a lot of times it's the person who is being worn down that has to be vocal about what they're feeling, about what they're seeing, about what's going on. I just am not comfortable with the way that you talk. It would really help me mentally with my sanity if you could just be a little more positive when you're talking to me. Oh my goodness. Tara said being gay and autistic at 23 is not always easy either, and adopted on top of that. All of those things sound like for not only for you, but for the people who love you. They're not always good at handling things that are hard. And that's not your fault, and that's not something that you should take on as maybe I'm not important. Maybe I'm not this. It shouldn't turn into that. Because who they are and their understanding of life really should have no bearing on who you are, who you desire to be, who you decide to be. And the difficulties that we experience with our family members, especially, sometimes they can cut so deep that we don't know any other way except to internalize, because we don't know how to handle or to communicate with them in order to let them know what we're feeling and how we're feeling and how they're affecting and impacting our lives. I appreciate you sharing that, because you're not by yourself. There are several of us who, unbeknownst to our parents, they felt like they were okay when their parents talked to them or treated them a certain way. So they think that I'm going to do what I know. And what we know is not always the right path. It's not always the right way. So it takes understanding. It takes growth. Even sometimes when you're setting boundaries, people think that you're doing it to hurt them. And that's not, you have to let them know that it's not about you and what's best for you in this instance. In order for me to get myself out of this dark place, or in order for me to be able to grow, in order for me to be able to flourish, I have to separate myself for a season. I have to set this boundary. I have to say no. I have to say I can't, or I won't. That doesn't mean I don't love you. That doesn't mean I don't respect you. That doesn't mean you have not done for me. What it means is I'm responsible for me. And in order for me to do what I probably should have done years ago or months ago or a long time ago, so that I can grow and so that I don't inflict the same damage and the same misunderstanding on my kids and the people that surround me, I have to separate myself from that. And it may not be forever. It may just be for a time that only you know when you're healed enough, when you're whole enough to address the situation again. Exactly, James. My boundaries aren't to hurt you. I set them because I love you and I value our relationship. And that's the thing. You set boundaries with people that you value, right? Anyone else doesn't even get the explanation. Anyone else doesn't even get this is why I'm doing this. Right? It's the people that you care about, that you love, that you respect, and that you value, that you not only set the boundaries for or with, but you're able to vocalize what the issue is first and foremost, instead of just saying, because some of us are really good at cutting people off, right? Some of us are really good at, you hurt me, cutting you off. You disrespected me, I'm cutting you off. But for people that you value, that conversation has to be had. It has to. Because if not, then we find ourselves becoming bitter because they don't get it. They don't understand. And they won't until that discussion is had. Really, James, you're talented. King Ghost. So you ghost people with no problem. I mean, I always say that it takes a certain degree of, it takes a certain degree of growth to be able to address something. So here's the thing. If you've never addressed the issue, then it doesn't make sense to immediately ghost or dismiss somebody, right? People don't know how far they can go until they're told, until they're shown. So, okay, well, every time you turn around, somebody is disrespecting you. Absolutely. Okay. Right, James, protect my peace at all costs. It's time for you to go. Or it's time for me to remove myself. And it probably is just me feeling like I should give people the benefit of the doubt. You get a couple chances to get it together because you probably didn't know. You probably didn't understand. Maybe you thought that based on my personality, I'd be okay with. So now we have to have that discussion. That's just my perspective about it. But, oh my goodness, so we're running out of time. So really quick, talking about your coworkers and your boundaries that you set at work. This also has a lot to do with you knowing what you're getting yourself into. And when I say that, what I mean is, let's say that you took a job, right? You took a job where you did not know that overtime was mandatory, or that your boss would have access to you, should have access to you, even on your days off, that you'll have meetings on your days off, you're on call some days. If that was never told to you, and all of a sudden you realize that you're getting called in on days that you shouldn't be getting called in, like, I have plans on my day off. My plans are not to sit around waiting for y'all to call me in. If those things are never addressed to you, then that means that your job, your relationship with your boss and your work is being abused. Like your position is being abused. And so it's your job to open up your mouth and say, I can't do that. I'm not available. It took me such a long time on my job as a pharmacist, because I kept thinking, well, if I don't pick up this shift when I need somebody to cover for me, I won't have anybody. But that's not true. It took me a while to realize that that's not true. But you have to be able to say no, even on your job, even with your coworkers. Can you cover for me? Sweetie, I'm actually about to head out because I have to take care of some things. My things don't go on the back burner just because you asked. All right, like, does that make sense? Like, on our jobs, we have to be able to say, I'm not available for that. And then two, I mentioned at the beginning of our talk about coworkers that overshare, because that's a boundary too. Like, girl, I don't want to know. And now, okay, so let me clarify, right? Because there are some of us that we like drama. We like to hear about all the juice, all the tea, all of it. I personally am not one of them, but for those of us who do, you may like to hear it. That doesn't mean you have to share it, right? All kinds of things. Gossip happens at work because we don't know how to set boundaries. When people know that you're open to something, they keep coming to you with it. And then next thing you know, a lot of times we end up in situations that we're not comfortable with. Now we're in between two co-workers that are having issues because we've been listening to both of them gossip about each other. And we'd be like, girl, you serious? Oh my God, I can't believe she said that. Boundaries have to be set in order for that not to be us. Now, too, it also depends on where you work. Because I do see a young hairstylist in the building. And I know that a lot of times those are atmospheres, depending on what environment you set. But atmospheres for people to say what's on their hearts and minds, to share and talk about all the tea that's going on, what's in the news, who went to jail, all of the things, right? But pretty much the 2 points that I wanted to make about setting boundaries on your job is, one, being able to say no to what you're not available to. And in saying no, you have to understand what's expected of you first before you can answer the yes or no. Can you train such and such coworker? I'm sorry. That's honestly not my job description. You have the right to say that if it's not. You can also choose to do it if you would like to do a favor for your boss, or if you enjoy training people. But if usually people usually if there are people who are paid more for doing that, then you want to be able to, I don't know what is going on with mine. Sorry about that, guys. If there are people who are paid more for doing that, then you have to be able to say, if you want me to do that job, I need to be getting paid more, right? But so many of us are so scared of what happens. What if I upset my boss? Well, I'm sure if their boss asks them to do more, they ask for more, especially if they know they're qualified for it. So if you don't set boundaries, then you open yourself up, you leave yourself open for abuse and also to be mishandled, right? So James said, I work from home, the gossip around here. If you work from home, you definitely should not have that problem of the gossip. And then secondly, anytime that someone feels like they have a right to know what's going on with you outside of your job, a right meaning they feel the need to dig. They feel that you're obligated to answer. Well, why can't you work Saturday? What do you have going on? I mean, first of all, it's my day off. So what I do outside of that really isn't something that I need to share. And that's important too, because we start sharing with our coworkers, girl, I'm about to call out. And what happens when it's time for somebody to get promoted or it's time for somebody um, to get recognized. Now, all of our coworkers aren't the type of people that will take every opportunity they can to outdo you, right? But some of us have that. And sometimes we give them the fuel that they need in order for us to not get the promotion that we want, for us to not get the raise that we want, because of all the discussions that went on while we were at work, because we didn't know how to set the boundaries. So in any relationship that you have to know what you're capable of, what you're available for, and what you will allow. And anytime things start to tiptoe or get closer to that boundary, then it's time to have that discussion of if you haven't already, to let that person know, to let that job know, to let that family member know, to let your partner know, your friend know, whoever it is. Whatever it is and whoever it is, if you don't tell them, they won't know. If you don't show them, they'll always think it's an option otherwise. So I hope you guys got not just entertainment, but definitely some information, some encouragement during this live today, to just be able to let your yes be yes, your no be no. And don't be afraid to tell, no matter what the cost is. Yeah, there's some people that are going to separate from you. There's some people that's going to be upset that you can't continue to do what you've been doing. And that's okay. That means that it's your season to separate from them, either until they grow or until you do. So I love you guys. I appreciate you always for showing up, commenting. Hopefully you share, have this discussion with, like I said, your friends, your family. What do your boundaries look like with your family? Instead of talking about it with another family member, talk to the person. Talk to the person who is violating your boundaries. Because that's really the only individual that can make that change, is the person who's involved. Yes, I'm sorry, my dear, you did miss it, but it's all good because there is a replay on Facebook. But you guys have an amazing day. I'll see you guys again on Thursday evening. It'll actually be very late Thursday. It'll be 10 o'clock Eastern time. But I will put out the flyer and I will see you guys then. Have a good one.